Corbin Burns is off to a disgusting start so far this year in MLB DFS, and he is on tonight's slate for MLB DFS and facing off with Trevor Rogers. And that's going to be a pretty fun matchup for today. And our question for MLB DFS is, do we keep on riding Corbin Burns, just riding this hot streak until it dries up? Do we go to potentially Rogers on the other side of that game? Do we go elsewhere at pitcher? A couple of dilemmas, a good slate, and a lot of good pitching options for today. So let's dive on in and get you set for Monday night's main slate. Welcome on into the solo shop. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire, here to get you set for Monday's 8-game main slate with lock set for 7:05 this evening, and not a lot of weather to note for today. The one thing that is noteworthy is that the coldest game on the slate, by about 10 degrees, is in San Francisco for the Giants and the Rockies. And this is a broader point as well. With the temperatures elsewhere finally going up, we should go back to downgrading offenses in San Francisco considerably, basically from now on, because temperatures there tend to be in the 50s or 60s. They're going to be 70s, probably at 80s at some point elsewhere very soon. So normally San Francisco is like a black hole for offense, so we don't want to stack. That's less true at the beginning parts of April. We are now in the parts of April where we probably want to be very low on that park in general for offense, starting with today's slate between the Giants and the Rockies. We'll talk about implications of that and our favorite pitchers for today in just 1 second. But first, hey, baseball fans, FanDuel has a fun promotion going on called $5 Dinger Tuesdays. That's tomorrow. All you have to do is bet a $25+ bet on the to hit a home run prop on any Tuesday MLB game. You'll receive a $5 site credit, $25 max, for each home run hit in the game by either team, regardless of if your bet wins or loses. Head over to FanDuel on Tuesdays to play the $5 Dinger Contest. Must be 21 plus and present in Colorado, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, or West Virginia. Refund issued as a non-withdrawable site credit that expires in 7 days. Max refund $25. Terms apply. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Colorado, call 1-800-522-4700. In Iowa, 1-800-BETS-OFF. In Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. For confidential help in Michigan, call 1-800-270-7117. In Tennessee, call the Red Line, 1-800-889-9789. Or in West Virginia, visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net. If you want some thoughts on Dinger Tuesdays, make sure you are tuning in for our 4 p.m. show here on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. We have our Q&A every weekday, 4 p.m. Eastern. Tuesdays start at 3:30 because Brandon Gadula is talking golf there. Outside of that, every weekday at 4 p.m. Also this week, we'll have our NFL Draft live stream with Brandon, JJ Zacharyson, myself, and Ryan Williams. That'll be Thursday and Friday, Thursday at 8 p.m., Friday, 7 p.m., talking betting, DFS, season-long implications of this year's NFL draft. So a lot of good stuff coming up there. But also here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, PGA is back this week from a DFS perspective. So Brandon and I talking that tomorrow. Tom Vecchio still has you covered with NBA and NHL and NASCAR back on Friday, talking Kansas coming up in this week as well. So a lot of good reasons to subscribe to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Make sure you are subscribed. If you like what you hear or if you win some money, leave us a rating and review. Pitching preview for this Monday slate, Corbin Burns, shocker, the highest salaried guy on tonight's slate. He is $11,100 on FanDuel. Julio Urias is $9,900. Trevor Rogers, facing Corbin Burns, is $96. Tyler Mahle, who's facing Urias, is $9,300. Shohei Ohtani back on the mound for tonight. He is $9,100. Charlie Morton, Zach Wheeler, and Sean Manaea are the others at $8,000 or higher. And for me, the top two pitchers on this slate are those two guys facing each other. That's Burns versus Rogers. They will be my top two pitchers for DFS for tonight. We'll start with Burns. We would rank higher for obvious reasons. He's facing the Marlins, plus matchup at home. Marlins have an 88 WRC plus against righties with a 25% strikeout rate. This is since the start of last year, and they don't walk a lot. The walk thing is kind of pointless in mentioning even because Burns is yet to walk a batter this year. That is despite a 47% strikeout rate. When you have a 47% strikeout rate and a 0% walk rate, it should be no surprise that his Skill Interactive ERA is 1.13. Now, that number's not going to stick. Obviously, he's going to walk someone at some point, I think, but He's throwing a nasty cutter this year. The velocity is up pretty big on that cutter from last year. So even if the peripherals don't stick, which again, they won't, the stabilized version of Burns is still going to be really freaking good. Like, let's say this year had not happened yet. We look at just last year's numbers. Burns that year, 3.18 skill interactive ERA, 37% strikeout rate. The 2020 version of Corbin Burns, ignoring entirely what he's done so far this year, is still the best pitcher on this slate for tonight. And we have reason to believe that he's better than what he did last year. We have a lot of reasons to believe that. So $11,100 is not high enough to scare me off of Corbin Burns, especially when he's at home in a non-threatening matchup. I think he's the best pitcher on this slate by a wide margin. I am not going to be alone in that, but when that's the case, sometimes chalk is chalk for a reason. So I would say, even knowing he will be the most popular option, I say you suck it up, you lock him in, and differentiate elsewhere because he is the number one pitcher on the slate by a significant margin. Now, with that said, Rogers is in a really good spot, too, on the other side of this game. He has a 1.64 ERA this year with a 3.27 skill interactive ERA. It may feel like that is coming out of nowhere, but it's not. Last year, Rogers had a 6.11 ERA. Obviously, that's not ideal. The peripherals were a lot better, though. You could have seen this coming because he had a 3.86 skill interactive ERA. He specifically got better once his velocity went up later in the year. He seemed to reach a new level there, giving hints at what he could do this year. And he's carried that velocity increase over into 2021. And in fact, it's up a bit even from there as well. So we'll stretch it out to a 6-start sample and include those last 2 starts last year. That puts him at a 3.36 skill interactive ERA with a 35% strikeout rate. Really good number. Not quite Burns, but it's very good. He's also letting up hard contact just 1.6% of the time. The one issue with Rogers is that he is still walking too many guys. That's going to drive a pitch count. That's going to put guys on base. That's an issue. And the Brewers have been better against lefties than versus righties, which is enough for me to definitively rank Burns higher between the two, especially with Burns being at home. I just still think that even after accounting for those things, that Rogers is the second best option on this slate. So I'm going to treat him as such. And I don't think he'll be all that popular. People tend to use money lines to decide who they want to use a pitcher. That's not going to push you towards Rogers, given that Burns on the other side. But I like to just use good pitchers and let the wins fall where they will, because baseball is a weird sport. I'd rather just use the guys who are going to get strikeouts. 2 strikeouts is equivalent to a win in MLB DFS on FanDuel. So I'm going to treat him as my number 2 option, despite the fact he's an underdog here. Might not get the win. Don't really care too much. I think that I just want to use guys who will get strikeouts. I know Rogers will get those in this matchup. So he is a full tier below Burns, but he's still the second best pitching option for me on this slate. As far as value options go, I really do like Charlie Morton. He is $8,600, so not like some super value play, but I need a lot of points to keep up with Burns and Rogers, and I think Morton can get those. He is at home against the Cubs here. The Cubs, a lot of issues to start the year. They have a 94 WRC plus against righties with a 26% strikeout rate. This is including last year's numbers too. That strikeout rate is the 3rd highest mark on the main slate. Now, Morton last year got off to a really rough start, and I actually stacked against him at one point. But he's come on really strong. He was good at the end of last year too. His velocity went back up, and he's been good this year. And part of that is that the velocity this year is good once again, but he's also throwing fewer 4-seamers, which is undoubtedly a good thing. It's working out really well. He has a 3.34 skill interactive ERA this year with a 29% strikeout rate. He's gotten back to getting ground balls, which is awesome. I'm trying to find some flaws with Morton, not really finding them all that much. He's at home. He's in a decent matchup. He's pitching well. So I would say that he is on par with Rogers. He is also a bit lower salaried. I would prefer Rogers by a bit, just because the strikeouts there are higher than they are with Morton. But Morton's very good. And I think that the way that I'm tiering things out here is Burns in a tier of his own. I would say Rogers is 2A, Morton is 2B, and both those guys very close to me. So I would say if we're doing, let's say, 5 lineups, you go 3 Burns, 1 Morton, 1 Rogers. I think that's where I'm viewing these pitchers for today. We'll talk about a couple more guys. I'm not as interested in things to watch as well to round out the pitching discussion for today. But before that, let's go to the other side of the Morton game and talk about stacks, because the Braves are facing Zach Davies, who is off to a really rough start this year. I'm not sure he'll jump out of it yet. And the Braves are a pretty tough team to face when you're trying to get the ball rolling in the right direction. The big issue for Davies is that his pitch mix is weird and his velocity is down. 2 strikes against him there. The sinker velocity is down half a tick. The changeup velocity is down 1.5 miles per hour. But he's also throwing more sinkers. He used it 39% of the time last year. It's up to 51% this year, which is in line with what he did before 2020. And given how good he was in 2020, you would think he'd stick to the status quo, do what he did last year, but it's not happening, and the results have not been good. He has an 8.80 ERA this year with a 6.15 skill interactive ERA. He has more walks and strikeouts, and that's not a huge issue for DFS today because his strikeout rate is so low, not as worried about the high walk rate limiting balls in play. He's also letting up a 10.5% barrel rate, so when he does let up a ball in play, they're generally being well struck, just a 44% ground ball rate. So it's all very strange to see this happening for Davies. It is worth noting, though, that he outperformed what was expected last year based on the peripheral numbers. And now the peripherals are not as good. You could have seen regression coming based on the peripherals, but now those peripherals are even worse, and the results are bad too. I'm inclined to believe the issues here will stick, which means the Braves are the top stack on the slate. As far as Davies from a platoon perspective, it doesn't really matter too much the handedness of the batter. He has a 23% strikeout rate versus righties since the start of last year with a 175 ISO. For lefties, lower strikeout rate at 18%, but also a lower ISO at 123. I'm going to bump up righties because of the power difference, but I think that both options work here. I mean, Travis d'Arnaud and Dansby Swanson work really well as value plays here. Ronald Acuna Jr. back out there yesterday. I can feel good about him as well. I know it's a little bit concerning given the nature of that injury. It's kind of one of those red flag injuries of, oh, okay, a side issue. But I feel like they probably wouldn't be risking the long-term outlook on Acuna if things weren't looking so great. So didn't do a whole lot this weekend. Do want to dig into the batted ball data, but I think we can feel pretty good about him in this matchup with Zach Davies. The second stack is one that goes against the 2021 data because Matt Harvey's peripheral data is actually not terrible, and the Yankees are struggling. I still think it's worthwhile to stack them here. Now, Harvey's ERA is 5.12, so we're not going against that data. That data would say, fine, stack against him. But his skill interactive ERA is 3.94. His expected ERA is 3.81, which means we should expect his ERA to come down from 5.12. There are a couple of reasons I'm skeptical that'll happen. There are 2 things that are bringing down the numbers in his peripherals and making them look better. The first one is a low walk rate. The second one is good batted ball data. And the low walk rate is actually good for us for stacking because it means more balls in play. The batted ball data is bad for us for stacking. We want to maximize fly balls, maximize hard contact. He's not allowing those right now. But batted ball data takes longer to stabilize than other stuff does. And he's had some games against really mediocre competition. The Yankees may be that. It's very possible they are. I'm just not quite ready to commit to them being that yet. Harvey is not getting strikeouts. He has an 18% strikeout rate. His swing and strike rate is 7%. And this is the same Matt Harvey effectively we've seen since all the way back in 2015. He's had a low strikeout rate, low walk rate, lots of balls in play. And that means that he needs to be great from a batted ball perspective to not be stackable against. I don't think he'll get that. That means that I'm going to be high on the Yankees here for stacking. That means the Yankees will be my number 2 stack behind the Braves for today. And the one plus of using a team that's really struggling is that their salaries have come down. Only Giancarlo Stanton and Aaron Judge have salaries higher than $2,900. So you can stack the Yankees with Burns pretty easily. Specifically, I love Gio Urshela. I think he's probably the guy I'm most excited to use among the values. He has a 49% hard hit rate versus righties. I believe this is just this year. It's a 205 ISO. Not sure if those numbers will stick, but he's hitting at a good spot in the order for a team I want to stack. He's $2,300. I think that makes him a great option here. So I'll build around him, build around Stanton and Judge here. I think the Yankees, despite their struggles and despite the fact that Harvey's peripherals are good, the Yankees do make a lot of sense for today. Now for our third stack, it sounds like Shohei Ohtani is going to hit today for the Angels, and that works 2 ways for stacking, both good and bad. The good is that, or the bad is that it limits the number of guys we can actually include in our stacks. We can't use Ohtani as a hitter on FanDuel at least, so that's bad. but it does boost the rest of the team for DFS because every good bat in the lineup helps everyone else out. More run scoring chances, you get more plate appearances if guys do well. That's a good thing. Assuming Mike Trout is able to play today, which might not happen. We'll talk about the ways to deal with that if he doesn't play later. I think we should stack against Jordan Lyles. As we mentioned last week, Lyles is getting better from where he was last year because his strikeout rate is up to 21%. It was 14% last year. And there are good reasons to think that that number will stay higher. He's throwing more sliders this year, and sliders are great pitches for strikeouts. The extra strikeouts are big. A 7% percentage point gap is quite a bit. They're just not enough. There aren't enough strikeouts to make us stop stacking against him yet. He's still allowing a ball in play 75% of the time. That's a big number. Only 29% of those balls in play are hit on the ground. 9.2% have been barreled. And the Angels just saw him last week. They are familiar with what Lyles is throwing right now. They were fine against him the first time. They had a couple barrels there. They made contact 80% of the time they swung. I think it makes sense to go back to the Angels here. Now, that is the view as of 9:16 on Monday morning. I'm not sure if it'll be that way at 4:16 because, again, a lot of this could change based on the way the lineup looks. If Trout can't play, that downgrades everyone. If Trout and Ohtani are out, that might make this lineup totally dead. I think that you could use Jared Walsh as a one-off, maybe just an Upton, but you have to be flexible here. A lot of the value of the stack does depend on what the lineup says. So that's why the 4 p.m. show is so valuable because we can see lineups, we can adjust, we'll have a better idea of who is hitting and who is not. So for now, based on what I would assume the lineup looks like for today, I'd say stack the Angels. We just have to make sure that they have enough viable guys to justify. Because if both Trout and Ohtani are out, that does change things pretty radically. So check back at 4 p.m. to see how we're viewing that offense. Let's talk about Ohtani as a pitcher here as we finish up with things to watch. I'm probably not going to be there personally. It's not a pitch count thing anymore. That was the issue last week. He actually exceeded his pitch count. He went to 80. So he's all set there. It's just he's having troubles putting the ball in the zone. His zone percentage is 43%. People are chasing stuff outside the zone just 23% of the time. And the Rangers just saw him last week, so they know how to approach this. And they were one of the teams that drove that up. They drew 6 walks in that game. And walks aren't the worst thing, as we've seen from guys like Justin Dunn, but they drive up your pitch count and make it harder to use you in DFS. So even though Ohtani's gone 92 and 80 pitches in his first 2 starts, he has not finished 5 innings yet. So I'm going to hold off on using Ohtani as a pitcher until that walk number starts to come down. He can still be very good as a pitcher because, again, walks are not the worst thing on the planet. They're just not great for DFS because of what they do to a pitch count. So I'd rather go Burns, rather go Rogers, rather go Morton over Ohtani for today. I think the Astros are a fine option today. They have the highest implied total on the slate. I would not be shocked, though, if I am a bit lower on them than consensus. That's mostly because I don't think Justice Sheffield is that bad. He's not a huge strikeout guy, but he's fine at 22%. He walks some guys, which limits balls in play. That's a downgrade for stacking, too. The one big thing for stacking against Sheffield is that he does let up a lot of hard contact, or at least he has so far this year. But it's a 3-start sample, and 2 of those starts came against the Dodgers and the White Sox. And the White Sox game was his first start when they were pretty much fully healthy outside of Jimenez. The Astros, solid offense. I am willing to stack them, but I will put them behind the other 3 teams. They would jump up above the Angels if Trout or Ohtani can't play. I just don't mind if I'm underweight on them relative to the field. If I wind up there, that's fine. I'm not going to be too scared about that. I think that's okay based on the way things set up. One other team I do like for stacking today is the A's. They're facing Rich Hill, so it's a Rich Hill revenge game, which it feels like it should be every team by this point. He really hasn't played for as many teams as I expected, but it's a revenge game regardless. Hill just doesn't seem like he's kicked the issues that he had last year. His strikeout rate is 19%. That is despite facing the Rangers in one of those games. I actually used him in DFS that week. Regretted it. Didn't go well. And things have gotten worse since that Rangers game too. The A's get a park factor upgrade in Tampa Bay because it's usually very cold in Oakland. It's about 70 inside in Tampa Bay. We can get some salary savers here too with this A's team. It's been a rough start this year for Sean Murphy and Matt Chapman, but both have hit lefties well in the past. I've seen enough from Chapman to feel pretty good about him for DFS. Murphy is struggling for sure, but they can make some hard contact. I would say Murphy and Chapman work for value plays. Also, if you need like one-offs, I think that Murphy and Chapman work there as well. I mentioned Jared Walsh before as a potential one-off for the Angels. So I would say start with the Braves and the Yankees, but got one-offs and potential other stacks via the Angels, the Astros to an extent, and also the A's for today. That is all the time that we have for today's slate. Again, it's probably a good one to tune back in at 4 p.m. for the Q&A show because things could change based on the way lineups look. So make sure you are subscribed to the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. Tune in there, 4 p.m. Eastern. Get your questions in, and we'll answer them live on air. Big week on those channels as well with the draft stream coming up on Thursday and Friday. If you have any questions for me, I am on Twitter at JimSannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcasts. Make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts as well. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you with your MLB DFS lineups. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow to get you set for Tuesday's slate. This has been the Solo Shot right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.